Thank you. Good morning. That was a very energizing keynote. Thank you, Sonder. And hope you're having a great day. Let's start with this. Can we roll the next slide?
Innovation, it's not just a word, it's an action. With artificial intelligence, we are not crawling or walking or running, we are flying. Today, Microsoft AI helps an architect bring history back to life. He doesn't see data, he sees fragments of our past. This is now. Artificial intelligence helps farmers grow more food with less resources. She's not collecting information, she's feeding the growing population without wrecking the planet. This is real. An engineer explores how AI can help the deaf see sound. She's not looking at obstacles, she's staring down opportunity. Innovation doesn't see the possibility of tomorrow, it creates tomorrow. And are you ready for the headline? Tomorrow is here today.
Tomorrow is here today. Indeed it is, and I think we are today going to talk about what next, what's beyond today. All right, a little bit about myself, so you get the context. Sonder ended with fun, let me start with fun. So this is a key ingredient to everything I do personally. If I'm not having fun, I'm out of it. Some things I'm very passionate about. On the right corner there is about women in tech. I'm super, super passionate about that. I can see a lot of women here. It makes my day. On the left corner, healthcare. So HIMSS is an organization which drives technology into healthcare. And I think each one of us here, because we are in this field of technology, we have superpower in our hand. And we need to make sure that somehow we impact the world with it. So I work a lot with HIMSS. I sit on the board of HIMSS India and try to drive some more technology into healthcare. Healthcare is a very difficult field, by the way, to get technology into, but we're trying. Well, I'll go back a little bit to go forward. Do you know this place? 1905. Anybody recognize this? The street? Anybody who's traveled to New York? This is the Flatiron Building in 1905. This is how it looked like. What do you see on the streets? Big buildings, but what else do you see around it? Horse carriages, right? There were about 100,000 horses which were running New York City in 1905. And many times over, families which were feeding the horses, maintaining the carriages, a whole industry behind horses and horse carriages. Cut to 1925, just in 2 decades. What do you see now? Automobiles. The revolution that happened in 20 years took horses entirely off the roads. Nobody needed it anymore. But what else? There were turbines, electricity starting to happen, water pumps, steamers, stuff like that. Can you see anything? You don't see all of that, right? And that is the point. Technology that really disrupts is invisible, beyond, it's under the surface. And that's the key point here, that most of the times, and we are living in that time now, that mobile phones used to be a revolution 10 years back. It's in our pockets, it's in our bags today, but it's not obvious, right? Maybe 10 years back, we were still holding on to it and walking around. It was very obvious. We are connected, the connectivity, can you see that? AI that's happening today, can you see that? And as we go along, you will see that technology really disrupts. And when it disrupts, it becomes invisible. It becomes part of the fabric of life. We are currently at such a point. Look at the Fortune 500s up there. These were not the companies which were in the S&P 500 10 years back. In fact, of the top 10 most valuable companies in 2010, by 2016, only 3 were remaining. All the oil companies which were big in 2010 had all disappeared by 2020. Microsoft happens to be there then and now, one of the few companies which are. And so today I will share a little bit more about how Microsoft thinks about today and tomorrow, and how we plan to empower you and how you can leverage some of that. But interestingly, none of these may be there 10 years from now. What's more? So McKinsey talks about robotics taking away 65% of the jobs. Could happen. Are you starting to see some things happening? Call centers which had 1,000 people today have 10 people. They're able to manage. Bank branches which were running with, say, a 50-member team today can run with an ATM, some automated stuff, and maybe 3 or 4 people. So we are starting to see this happen. Even beyond this, these are the huge, big, mammoth challenges that we have, right? And it's imminent now. Global warming, world hunger. And this is where quantum computing is now starting to play a role, that we can actually solve some of these problems. Let's look at food production and take nitrogen fixation for an example. With our existing computing systems, if we have to figure out how to create microbes which are going to increase the nitrogen in the crops and fields without using so much of fertilizers, because fertilizers is killing our environment. If we need to figure that out, it will take us apparently another 100 years with the current computing systems to figure out how we're going to solve that. And that's where quantum computing comes in, and in a week or in a few days, you can actually figure out what are those natural microbes in the ground which are doing the same thing in a better way, understand that, and re-engineer some of our fertilizer mechanisms. And if we can do that, we can reduce chemicals in the soil, in the earth, improve the global warming scenario, improve our living situation, improve what we are digesting, overall make us healthy. Now, quantum computing is now starting to give us those abilities. And it's crashing 100 years of computing to a day or a week. Amazing, isn't it? We are living, you and I are living in a world that is so exciting. Are we even touching the tip of it? Well, we should be, so let's see what. So this whole thing is about digital transformation, and digital transformation could mean anything from the IoT to AI to quantum computing, whatever it is. But as organizations are looking at this, some of them are feeling excited and they are seeing success, and some of them inevitably are seeing some failure. And it's up to us whether we see success or failure. But if you look at organization, look at what they're saying. 68% say it's going to increase their profits. 91% says that, hey, it's sparking innovation. We are finding efficiencies. But look at the other half. 85% is saying that they must offer digital services or they become irrelevant, right? So there is a fear setting in there. There's opportunity and there's a challenge. 64% is saying that they may go out of business if they don't create that change in the next 4 years. So people are aware. This was a survey done with the CEOs of companies, and they are very aware of the opportunity and the challenge right there. At Microsoft, we are stepping back to think a little bit more and a little bit deeply about digital transformation. It's not just about the technology, right? It is not. And that's where we have come to. And we think it's a journey. It's not a master move. It's not like you create one application and, hey, now I'm digitally transformed. It's all about a digital transformation through creating some applications, some solutions, some projects. It is not. It's actually a journey, and that starts with a few elements. Value generation. So don't think about technology first. Think about the value that you're going to create. If it is about agriculture, What's the value you're going to create there? It's your ability to sense what is lacking, water is lacking, chemicals are lacking, and then be able to provide it, automate it automatically, right? So there's a purpose behind every digital transformation we do. And behind that purpose, who's driving that purpose? Who's identifying that purpose? It's you, it's me, it's the people. So we believe and believe strongly that people are behind every digital transformation, not just behind, they are at the core. So how can we help you achieve more is the problem that we are solving today, yesterday, and tomorrow at Microsoft. Now, this is Microsoft Sri Lanka. Some of them are here. They do a bunch of stuff with customers in Sri Lanka. And it's not just about making customers successful. Of course, we work deeply with, say, John Keel's there, for example, and they see that it's no longer a customer-supplier relationship. It's a partner-customer relationship, or cotton collection where they're saying cloud is the new fashion. It is. But it's also about the AI for Good hackathon, what we do with the students, how we are skilling for the future, etc. So join in with some of those. The offices, you can Google the office and find it. I was there yesterday. I don't remember the street. But you're welcome there every Thursday evening. They have community meetups happening. Join that. So what are some of the things behind this digital transformation then, if it's not only about technology? First is a vision and strategy that taps into human ambition and sparks imagination. So we're not talking about taking a project and doing it better. We're talking about step back from what you're doing. Let your imagination go free. Think about what is the ambition. Think bigger and larger. What is Sri Lanka's ambition, for example, or the world's ambition on a particular thing like, say, food and hunger? And start from there. It's about the culture. And if you look at Microsoft's transformation in the last 5-6 years and what Satya Nadella has been able to achieve, at the core of it all, he talks about the soul of Microsoft, which is nothing but the culture and the way we interact with you and the customers and everybody else, the partners. And that culture is important in every organization if you're thinking about digital transformation. So we think a culture that keeps teams connected, elastic, because teams are different today. It's no longer a set of people who are sitting inside an office and working. It is like cross-country, cross-project and stuff. So the culture is super important for the future. Unique potential, and we should spend a second on this. The unique potential, and what do we mean by this? You may look at competition and say that, hey, they're doing something and I need to replicate that or do it slightly better so I win the market. One thing we learned at Microsoft is don't worry so much about what competition is doing, because your unique positioning in the market and your unique standing in the professional society of tech, if you will, would be based on that unique potential you have. And when you uncover that is when you become unique, right? Because everybody is unique. It is just that we are so far into copying what others are doing and a trend and something else, and that goes to beyond the trend. So think beyond the current trends. Know the trends, because that is going to be a multiplier for your success, but go beyond the trend and think about what is that unique potential, whether an individual or an organization. Unlock that, and that talks about some introspection and stuff, work on that, but unlock that and then amplify the value you create with it. Capabilities. That's the skill in capabilities, and that is something you need to just work on. How many of you code every day? Not enough. Quite a few, but yes. And how many of you work on AI? AI? Any AI projects? Oh. In fact, a storekeeper in Japan actually does AI for a living. She's never learned computer science, and I'll talk to you about how to go about doing it. So the next time we meet, we should have everybody working on AI, if not quantum computing, at least AI. AI is so democratized now. We'll talk about it. So these are the 4 things that is important for the future, because you can't yet see the future. And Khalil Gibran says this very well about children and parents and children. He says that parents are the bow and children are the arrow. And then he says, don't even think about giving your thoughts to the children, because they are going to be living in a future that you cannot even dream of, right? We are in that kind of a situation now, that we cannot dream of the jobs that are going to be out there 10 years from now, 10 years or 20 years from now. 65% of the jobs are going to be overhauled. The next revolution, we call this Industry 4.0, but according to World Economic Forum, the next revolution is what? What's the next revolution waiting to happen? Anyone? Skill revolution. That is what is waiting to happen. So these are part of the skills, and they have put out some skills that you need to, at least the younger generation, you and your children and your grandchildren need to develop for the future, which is about critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration. It's not about IoT and AI and stuff, because these things are going to change, right? But the things that will remain are these. We live in a connected world, right? And we believe that the intelligent cloud and the intelligent edge, and the edge is super important because more and more compute is going to the edge. You don't want to wait for the patient's medical inputs to come onto the device, from the device, go to the cloud, do the analytics, come back and tell the nurse, hey, it's time to give him insulin. You don't want that, right? You want the machine to immediately send an alert to the nurse's mobile phone, if it is, saying that, hey, it's time to give an insulin. You can take the data to the cloud and do analytics later, but it's important that stuff happens on the edge. Another way we think about this is data and AI. 50 billion connected devices by 2030. Amazing, right? Imagine every piece of thing that we have here will be connected. That's the edge device. 175 zettabytes of data. And not too far away, by 2025. What are we doing with it? And that's where we think about it in terms of digital feedback loop. It's nothing but the ability to take the data, use AI, analyze, and then action based on the data. We think it will impact products, operations, people, and of course, operations. Let's look at Tesla. What's happening with Tesla with the digital feedback loop? So Tesla takes in a lot of telemetry from the vehicles and from customer feedback. So from the customer feedback, they got to know that there's some issue with the braking signals for this Model 3. Then they looked at the vehicle telemetry and figured out that, hey, brake performance is across the fleet. There is some issue with it. They analyzed it, and then they updated it over the air. They created the fix, updated it over the air, and they got happy customers. Instead of having a bunch of furious customers who had to send their cars back to get this fixed, which is the normal thing, Tesla could just do over-the-air updates. So they have a phenomenal advantage in the market. How are they getting it? If you look at the number of developers, about 6.6% of Tesla's, and Tesla is an auto manufacturer, it's not an IT company. 6.6% of the people in the organization are developers. And that is the key thing. You and I are in this great position where every industry is becoming a software industry. And this is figuring in almost every industry across the world. It's not just in education, in healthcare, in manufacturing. So when we looked at the number of employee increase of developer versus non-developer across industries, there was not a single industry where it was not growing. So every industry is hiring more, which just means it's such a superb opportunity. So in a nutshell, I believe it is about people and technology. Let's see what. I'll talk a little bit now about why it's important that you take this really seriously and do a little bit more. And let's see why and then what you can do about it. Women in the room, are you feeling cold? Anyone feeling cold? Not really. Today's but I'm wearing a jacket because I'm feeling a little ill, but other than that, nobody's feeling cold, right? Typically in an office room, if you go to office rooms, surely yes, it may be 40 degrees outside, but the conference room will be really, really cold. Have you felt that? Yes. Cinema theaters? Yes. And any other public, everywhere it is kind of beefed up. So this is a typical scenario in our offices. I mean, women come with jackets and shawls and they're bundled up. Well, the men are walking around happily, right? Because they are at the optimum temperature. And the reason is these systems were designed like 100 years ago, or at least 80 years ago. And they were designed by white male in the West Side. And that was the optimum temperature for men, so they designed it accordingly. And it doesn't seem to be so easy to adjust this. You can forever go every day and tell the guy, hey, can you make it warmer? Can you make it warmer? And then you have to keep repeating it. There doesn't seem to be a simple solution. So I met with some 15-year-old girls. In fact, 60 of them 2 weeks back at Johnson & Johnson. And I talked to them about this, and they said, yes, we feel cold all the time in the theater, in the subway, etc. And then I asked them, so what should we do about this? And there was one girl who came up with a very brilliant answer. She said, we need to be part of the process of deciding the temperature, right? And that is the key. Now, before I dive into that point a little bit more, this is again New York, the streets of New York. In the US, for example, and in many other places, a lot of video surveillance happening. So with the advance of AI, you have cameras, they are surveilling you, they are looking at the face recognition, right? Seen that before? It's very easy. They are identifying all this. And in some places like Chicago and Atlanta, where the crime rate is very high, what the police is doing is they're using the street surveillance data to kind of predict criminals, predict who could be a potential criminal. So they're looking at this data, and then they're looking at which neighborhood are they in, who's their circle of friends, what have they done on Facebook, etc., etc., and they're saying, okay, this could be a potential criminal, that could be a potential criminal, and they are saying, let's do something before the crime happens. So they call them in and have a hearing. This became a big issue, and there was a court case about it. And you know why? Because who were they pulling in mostly? Who do you think they were pulling in mostly? Well, the 15-year-old girls had the correct answer. I was hoping I'd get it here. The black men, right? So why? Why do you think that was happening? The bias we have. Now, even without this system, the number of men who are being convicted, the number of men who are being brought into trial, the number of people who are being halted on the road to actually do an inquiry, all of it was anyway black people. They were getting pulled up way more. So what is it? Are black people more criminals? Definitely not. If we went there, we are slightly less black. So we could also be pulled up, right? It is bias. And obviously that bias is being baked into the AI systems that we are creating. And what does that mean for you and me? Life is going to be hell if we land in the US, but it's not just the US. It's going to be across the world in the next 10 years. So what does it mean for you and me? Our next job screening could be done by a robot or by an algorithm. The next admission to a school for your children could be by an algorithm. everything that impacts our lives could ultimately get impacted by decisions or recommendations that systems are throwing out. And if we bake bias into that, we are at a loss. So today, if you look at who's the humans of AI, Google it, you will find it's mostly all men, mostly all white men, and then a few spot of white women. And we are completely out of it. And that is the opportunity, and that's the imminent need for you, me, and everyone to be part. Just as that little kid said, we have to be part of the process. Whether you're a coder, a tester, somebody at policy, decision making, etc., doesn't matter. You need to understand enough about the upcoming technologies, and you need to be part of the process. So let's try to work on that. So Satya says this very nicely, that it's us humans making design choices. We cannot blame a system later on. We have to be part of that design choice, and we have to influence the design choice. So, are you present for the future? Are you? We are not going to get far with that. Are we present for the future? Yes. Absolutely. So now let's talk about, so what should we do about this, right? It's a phenomenal future waiting for us, but we have to be part of it. Be future ready. Build on your terms. I mean, whatever technologies you use, build on your terms. Operate seamlessly, trust your cloud. Those are some of the things that we talk about. Now, I won't go too much into this because Sander has already kind of talked about the shifting landscape of development, right? Multiple languages and stacks, decreased time to market, da-da-da-da. And I loved the manifesto, the Agile manifesto, which says that you need to make sense of what you are doing and then be able to share that with others so others can use it. And that is exactly the core principle of Microsoft. You said you love TypeScript. Who created TypeScript? Pardon? Pardon? Microsoft. Microsoft created, develops, and maintains TypeScript. R is an open source language. Microsoft created R Open. Now, R Open, what it does is, R runs on single-threaded system, right? So we use a lot of R internally and figured that, hey, this is really slow. How can we create it faster? So we internally created stuff that was changed it from a single-threaded to a multi-threaded system. And voila, the time decreased rapidly. That we packaged and put it out as R Open. So this is what we continuously do. We are a massive organization. We have 110,000 people, not as massive as some others, but we have at least 50,000 engineers with us who are constantly working on all of this internally to deliver our cloud services. So we take stuff we learn, package it into products, and put it out there for you. So stand on the shoulders of giants. Like, you don't need to redo everything. And you need to trust. Trust is a key element. So whether you trust and use some of the products or we trust our customers and give some of the products, it doesn't matter. But the point is, in this world of rapid changing, try to leverage what is already there. It could be Microsoft, it could be Google, it could be anyone. But understand what are the products out there, leverage them, and create stuff faster. So the point I wanted to say about this is, earlier I said, whoever you are and whatever you do, there's a role for you in this new universe. If you do not develop, and we call them citizen developers, right? And there is Power Apps and Microsoft Flow. This is no-code way of developing application. I can develop an application using Power Apps without knowing any code, just drag and drop a mobile application and give it to my customer or partner. That's available today, and it has an AI builder. So just by dragging and dropping stuff, you can even add a little bit of AI in it. Cut to the left, the professional developers. And these, now you need GitHub and Visual Studio, and we just announced Visual Studio Online, which is going to allow people from different countries and different teams to work together online, and that is born out of the success of VS Code, right? So these kind of things and the APIs and all of this is coming to you partly out of what we do for ourselves, and we package it into services for you. So it's out there. I'll give you a little bit at the end to say, where do you go find, how do you get started, how do you learn? So 3 things for you that we focus on. You need to build productively. You need to scale your innovation, and you need to monetize intelligently. So this is where you have, in the Create, you need all the tools, the tool sets, and DevOps. Azure DevOps connects with GitHub seamlessly and makes sure that the whole thing that Saunders talked about creating agile development, automating test flows, the CI/CD pipeline, all of that is available, and some of you might be using it. This is a paradox, right? Innovation versus reliability. So if you want innovation, you need speed, because you need to be in the market fast. And if you want reliability, you need control. And how do you get both? And that's what some of these systems of Azure DevOps gives you. It gives you speed, because you're doing smaller, shorter, faster, and then you're getting control, because you're not just doing it without a unit testing or without an integration testing. By the way, there are people who still do it. No unit testing, just going out and doing an integration testing and putting it out for critical processes even. So we're trying very hard to tell folks that you don't have to compromise between speed and control. You can actually do both. And when we talk about Azure DevOps, I just want to say that it was born of our need, actually, to manage these numerous teams that we had. So if you look at it, in 2010 to 2017 is our journey on Azure DevOps, right? Creating then. Azure DevOps is nothing but VSTS, and then it was, again, built on top of it. But our one engineering system, so initially we had this engineering and test department separately. Do you still have that? Yeah? And imagine 25,000 people and 2 sets of people who are like someone who is doing the dev and someone who is doing the test, and we found it supremely difficult to manage our products as they were growing. So we created the one engineering services. So that was the first thing. And then we went to VSTS, extensions, GBFs. I'm not going into it in deep, but you can read this. You can Google Microsoft and how they did DevOps. But essentially, we created the DevOps product out of a need for a DevOps product internally. And then we brought it out externally. And it's free for up to 5 users. So if you're not using DevOps at all, good place to get started. And it's about, and this is where GitHub becomes a big part of it. It's a seamless integration between DevOps and GitHub. So you have the repository, you can pull and push and whatever you want to do. But this kind of allows you to do small projects, complex projects, whatever it is, but with both speed and control. And so it's a best practice that you must do. Scaling your innovation. So we have a huge research arm, and there are about 4 or 5 centers where we are, including India, which is the closest. And the thing about this innovation is that we are reaching human parity in many of the AI services. And what that means is that it will come into mainstream, right? When you reach human parity is when these things come into mainstream. Speech synthesis, for example.
As the name suggests, the original submarines came from Yugoslavia.
So there are 2 audio I'm going to show you, and you need to say which is original and which is the artificial. So A, you just heard.
This is easy enough if you have an unfinished ad directly above the bathroom.
Does it sound similar? Yeah? One of them is artificial. One of them is natural. Can you say which? Who's for A? Artificial. Very few. Who's for B? And some are undecided. Well, A is the artificial, but can you make out? You can't really, right? So speech synthesis really has reached human parity. A quick look at, just watch it. This was developed by Professor Song Won Lee in the Seoul University. Just using brain signals. If you're a paraplegic and you just need to think that I want to drink the fruit juice, it actually lifts, pours it. This is how it's capturing the brain imaging. And it's so beautifully done, right? It's almost like a human doing it. It's not spilling. So this is possible today. Are you guys doing anything like this? If you're not, it's not that difficult. That's what I'm going to show you. This uses cognitive services. He created that using the cognitive service toolkit. You can use TensorFlow, you can use whatever you want, but you can use Azure Cognitive Services as well. And that's the thing about Azure today, right? Azure is so open that we really don't care what technologies you use. Our job is to make sure that you are successful, whatever tech stack you are using. So long as you use Azure, everything else is fine. So Azure Cognitive Services. So language, vision, web search, speech, and the new one that we've added is decision making. So why do we do this? This is so things are going to be developed very easily. So you can sit and create something like what that professor did, a prototype, you can actually start to do in, say, a month. It's not taking a long time. People come in and use cognitive services and create a proof of concept in like 2 days. That's all it takes. So that's the point about these pre-trained models. And if you take machine learning on Azure, and you look at the right side, you can see that everything, I mean, it works with everything. PyTorch, TensorFlow, SkyFi, whatever it is. The point is, build on your terms. Don't change what you are building, but leverage what's available in terms of frameworks and tools and stuff, so you're building faster and better. And now about inclusion. You could have no skill on machine learning, or you may be creating your own algorithms. Whatever you are, there's something for you. AutoML is a key thing that's developed now, right? Anybody using AutoML? No? Well, it's very easy, so you can get started from, it's all drag and drop and stuff, so this should be easy for you. This is where you can go and find all the APIs and SDKs and stuff. So there's no reason to wait, and whatever you are using, whatever kind of a language, programming language or framework you are using, on the right side you can still find your poison. The second thing is about scaling your innovation. I won't go too much into this, but know that Linux, for example, is almost half our VMs are on Linux as much as on Windows. So the world is wide open. The point is about availability. When you're building for, say, retail or banking or something like that, availability becomes very key. The 54 regions worldwide is kind of giving you the coverage that's going to make it very, very high available. And that's actually more number of data centers than AWS and Google combined. So that's some phenomenal infra at your fingertips. Let's look at monetizing again. So we recently used the decision maker. So when we do Xbox, right, we have the Xbox business. And so we have recommendations and personalization to do for Xbox. So we use this. So whatever we are showing you is what we're using. We use this, and we kind of kicked up our sales by 60% when we started using it. So there's some additional services. Go explore that. Right? The point I'm trying to make is that the stuff you see as services is many a times stuff developed for ourselves. And then we put it out to monetize, or we open source it. We do both. I will emphasize this. So when you're not new on a technology, something can drive you, which is purpose. And I think purpose is something you will discover sometime. For me, the purpose became healthcare. There was a reason I was doing stuff, and there was a reason I was using technology, and it's all driving towards healthcare or driving towards diversity, which is women in tech. Find your purpose. It's easy to say find your purpose, and you'll find it in different ways, but it is good to have that. And one of the purposes we really need you for is using AI for good. So I showed you earlier about the Sri Lanka running that AI for good hackathon. So we constantly run stuff like that, whether it's AI for accessibility, AI for humanitarian action, and we're pretty serious about this. We have an autism hiring program. We are actively going and looking for people with autism and hiring them. So we've completely changed our hiring process because people with autism don't like that tele-interview in the beginning, for example. So we completely knocked it off. Said, no, tele-interview for you. Interviews for autism hiring is different. It is not like a standard interview. Sometimes they just don't like the conference room, so you take the interview elsewhere or whatever. So it's all flexible hiring process, but we do a lot of diversity hiring, and when we say diversity, it doesn't mean women and racial diversity. It means things like autism and spectrums like that. But this is something that we would love to work with you on. If you want to know more about what's happening with Microsoft, events and stuff, just scan this QR code. What that does is you come into our community and you will get monthly one newsletter that comes from us. It's called The Source. That'll kind of tell you what we are up to, what's the new techs, and what's the events happening, whatever you want to know. So one basic information of who we are and what we are doing will be at your fingertips always. That's it, and I will leave you with this. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you for your time and tolerating me. Thank you.